Hey, you little sinners and saints. Today we're going to be doing the Ken and Barbie serial killers. Okay, here we go. Warning, trigger warnings, all kinds of warnings. Okay, Ken and Barbie serial killers by Jennifer Benavides. Okay, here we go, people. Maybe not. Hold on. I personally don't like for y'all to see what the hell I'm doing. Okay, today we're going to be doing an interesting case, a very interesting case that covers and goes along with all of the additional serial killers series. Every couple months, I try to put out some good ones. Um, some are just, your regular serial killers, and then other ones, they're brutal, brutal shit. Not that killing's not, but still. Um, and I take a lot of time to go through an effort to go through and research, and I lost another PowerPoint. Today I was putting lots up under my desk and through my desk and stuff, and I just jerked the cord out of the back of the computer. So it didn't save it. And usually it does, but it didn't. So here we are. I tried to throw some information and pictures on there. I will be honest, this is like I have 64 or 68 pages of notes on this case. So this may be a part two and part three type deal. I'm gonna start trying to do some cult series as well, like Marilyn Manson, Charles Manson, things like that. There's a lot of weird ones here I've seen lately. Um, but it takes a lot of time to research, script, record, edit, all that, which I really don't edit. So, but we're going to try to start having a little series of stuff. And today we are going to talk about again Ken and Barbie killers. I know some of you watch my video with your kids. This is not one of those videos that even want the dog to be around. So tell them mommy and daddy needs to drink coffee alone or something like that. Ian Brady and Maria Henley, Fred and Rosemary, and Paul, Bernardo, and Carla Homolka. What do all these people have in common? They are all people who fell in love, became a couple, and started killing the hell out of people. Killer couples actually make up about, let's see, hold on, they hurt other people now, even though they only make up about 20% of killer couples. They're often notorious, definitely inhumane, and brutal deaths. And Carla and Paul, the Ken and Barbie, I'm not going to keep referring to either. I'm either going to say Carla and Paul or something. But they were no exception to the case. When diving into this case today, they were known as the Ken and Barbie killers. I'm telling you, I had a lot of pages to write, so forgive me. That was the name they were given because they were their outward appearance, the way that they looked how they projected themselves sort of a perfect image to the world, but inside and behind closed doors, it was ugly, dark, twisted, and horrible. Before we get started, we're going to talk about the backgrounds of Paul and Carla, and hopefully we can see some red flags as to where things went wrong with these two people. And we're going to talk about how they met and how they began their reign of terror in Canada. I also wanted to mention that we're going to try to figure out the psychology of why Paul Bernardo and Carla um, were the way they were. I mean, they were psychopaths or sociopaths. I think more of sociopaths. I got theories on those two things, but that's another video. Um, or were they just normal people who got screwed up in their childhood and developed some strange tendencies? I don't know. I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but we're going to try to figure out together. So let's talk about Paul and Carla. Paul Bernardo has often been described as a very handsome, attractive man. He was tall, sandy hair, vivid blue eyes, and a smile that showed off a set of deep dimples. And you know how girls like dimples. I do. Carla, she was the girl next door, and she had long blonde hair, perfect skin, a spunky personality, and she had these green blue eyes. On paper, they were the perfect match and were perfect for each other, but the truth was much darker and more twisted than anyone could have ever imagined between the two of them. They were responsible for at least 18 sexual assaults and at least three murders, one being Carla's very own sister, Tammy. Now, if you're looking for a Wikipedia recitation of this case, you need to keep on going because we are going to do a deep dive into their lives and the crimes of these two truly twisted individuals. So grab a cup of coffee, grab a snack, settle in, and let's begin. We're gonna. This is Carla. This is Paul. I got pictures of them when they were younger too. Um, I can't remember when they said they got together because some of these pictures look quite young. So I don't know. Okay, Paul Bernardo was born on August 27, 1964 to Kenneth and Marilyn Bernardo in Scarborough, Canada. His mother, Marilyn, had been born to Ross and Elizabeth Hampton, but for some reason, which we still don't know, Ross and Elizabeth ended up putting their children up for adoption. So Marilyn and her two siblings were all put up for adoption, and they were never really given a good reason of why. Marilyn got lucky. She was adopted by a wealthy lawyer and his wife in Toronto, Gerald and Elizabeth Eastman. Um, she had a happy, normal, upper class life. She also was cared for, and she was described by a friend as outgoing and happy teenager. School was not an issue. She had understanding parents. Now, Kenneth Bernardo, Paul's father, was the son of an Italian immigrant who built and ran a successful marble and tile business so that Kenneth too grew up well off um, in a good family, but he had three older siblings. But his father drank too much, and when he did, he would take his frustrations out on his wife and his children. And this was the type of man who was functioning functioned in the old school Italian way where men are the dominant and women are submissive and children should be heard and not seen. Kenneth remembered that the physical Kenneth remembered that the physical abuse against his mother stopped whenever he was about 5, that their marriage of the parents wasn't a happy one even after didn't end didn't Kenneth didn't end up joining his father in the family business for whatever reason. Instead, he decided to become an accountant. He was good with numbers. Now, Marilyn married Kenneth Bernardo only after her father disapproved of the original choice for a husband that she wanted to marry. And really liked this guy. But anyway, her father felt like he didn't have the right education, didn't have the right education level, so he pushed her towards Kenneth Bernardo instead of the man that instead a man who was educated and had a good job. And they got married in 1960s. They moved into a nice house with a swimming pool and upper middle class neighborhood in Scarsboro. But I want to get something to drink. Sorry. Which is in a suburb of Toronto. And they had 2 children, a son named David and a daughter named Deborah. But their marriage really wasn't a good one. And of course, how would it be knowing that Marilyn didn't want to marry Kenneth? She wanted to marry someone else, but ended up marrying Kenneth because that was what her father wanted. And Kenneth himself had taken a page out of his father's book and was reported to be abusive to Marilyn and their children. She could only tolerate this for so long. She eventually found herself searching outside the marriage for love and acceptance, finding in the arms of her previous boyfriend, the one she actually wanted to marry. And eventually, her previous boyfriend, whom she wanted to marry out of the marriage, found her love and acceptance elsewhere. Sorry, had some. According to Marilyn, when Paul Bernardo was born on August 27, 1964, he weighed 8 pounds 10 ounces and was 20 inches long. When he was born, he appeared to have a large purple mark on his face, like in the 1600s. The double mark would have been referred to as transient national blood clot, which dissolves during Marilyn's labor within a few months, so it went away. Since the baby had been deprived of oxygen and yes, that's how I say oxygen, for an unknown amount of time, it now has aphasia. As an adult, I probably fucked that up. As an adult, he would have to relearn language. As a child, he would be delaying communication and language development. As an adult, this would require relearning language, expression difficulties are one of the primary symptoms of this disorder. Through speech, trouble understanding speech, and difficulty with reading and writing. Now, Marilyn recalled that Paul was the easiest of the 3 um, children, his older siblings, to raise. Incredibly loud, he caused a lot of chaos, but Paul was quiet and kept to himself. Well, how was he quiet and loud? But he was quiet and kept to himself. But she also said that he wasn't affectionate at all, and that he could be extremely selfish and stubborn. His quiet nature and tendency to become frustrated may have been a result of his tongue being essentially fixed whenever he was born. I'm thinking like his tongue with it. I don't know. I think they call it a cleft palate. So they got to go in there and separate it. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to it. But he was unable to speak until he underwent minor surgery to correct this at the age of 5. He was unable to speak, so he could only grunt and make noise to express himself. After this, he had to endure many years of stuttering and speech impediments before he felt comfortable speaking in front of others. As a child in school, he was constantly taunted about the way he sounded. Children called him Smelly Barnyard, playing off his name of Bernardo. However, the nickname couldn't be more in contrast of who the young Paul Bernardo was. He was I don't want to use the word. He always kept his appearance neat and clean. Um, Sam explained exactly how Kenneth Bernardo felt about Paul not being his biological son, since his last name is listed as Bernardo on the birth certificate. In later years, Kenneth would tell reporters that it wasn't a big deal to him because he didn't care. It was Paul who seemed to care, but Paul wouldn't find out for many years later that he was raised without knowing that the man that he called his biological father wasn't. As long as Paul could remember, Marilyn, Bernardo, and Paul would fight often and sleep in separate beds. In later years, Kenneth wouldn't tell reporters that it wasn't a big deal to him, but he didn't care because he didn't care. It was Paul who seemed to care. But Paul would find out that for many years that he was raised without knowing the man that he called his father was his biological father. As long as Paul could remember, Marilyn um, and Paul would, there's two Pauls, Paul Sr. and Paul Jr. Paul would fight often and sleep in separate bedrooms. Paul probably learned how a marriage works and how people treat each other in the relationship by watching his parents. As a kid, reality is basically what you see. You do not know how other households work, how other people's parents live, or how they love. You just know what you see. When your parents fight, when your father calls your mother horrible names, demeans her, and makes her feel like she's an inch tall, you will grow up thinking that this is what marriage is like. This is how you show love. And when Paul was about 7 years old, his mother located her biological sisters and she began spending a lot of time with them, which caused her to be away from the home a great deal during his formative years. It was like she was escaping to be happy from the abusive marriage. And she was also abandoning her children. She would pick up, she would pack up every weekend, leaving Paul and his older siblings alone and unsupervised with Paul was 5 children. He ran away from home, that's Paul Jr., and didn't come back for several days. When he did come back, it was as if no one had even noticed he was gone. No one asked, "Where have you been?" And if it was described as friendly, handsome, happy boy who was always smiling, showing his deep dimples and perfect white teeth to all the mothers in the neighborhood, would feel compelled to pinch his chubby cheeks and tasseless sandy hair. They all wanted children who were as polite and well mannered and sweet as Paul Bernardo. Okay, let's look at some other things. And now this goes into Carla, which we'll do that anyway. That's her on her wedding day. I'm gonna add some more to this because we're breaking this up into a couple parts. See, some of these pictures look very young, and I'm not going to show the victims yet, but we'll go ahead and end this one here. We'll call this part one because one comes before two, and then we will pick up on part two probably tomorrow. But I will see you later. Thank you for coming by, and bye.